Hi there, it's Ms. Nowakowski coming to you from the studio at Grower Elementary in the Richmond School District. The project I'm going to share with you today is paper weaving. This is one example of simple paper weaving. I learned how to do this when I was a young girl in craft classes, at school, at brownies, that type of thing. And all you need for this is paper. You could use all different types of paper. You could use construction paper. You could use paper from your recycling. I've got some different colored papers here, but I also picked up a magazine for my recycling, or the newspaper. Any kind of paper you can use that you can cut up. So you will need a pair of scissors and a ruler. You might use a ruler if you want to have exact measurements, and then a pencil to mark those measures as well. So to begin our first weaving project, I'm just taking a rectangular piece of paper and folding it in half. And then I'm going to use that fold line to do some measuring, and I'm going to create a loom using this first piece of paper. So I'm going to measure every 2 centimeters, and I'm just going to make little marks here. And you can just estimate as well. You can just cut, but I'm going to do this one with measuring. 18 and 20. And then I would do the same thing up at the top, because I'm going to connect those. Now I'm just going to draw a line actually across here, because we're not going to go right to the very end. And then along that line, I'm going to make my little hash marks here every 2 centimeters. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And then I'm going to connect this top hash mark with the bottom. And I could visualize that, but I can also just quickly here draw those lines. And then I'm going to cut along those lines, and you can use a pair of scissors. You might be able to use some sort of paper cutter if you have one. Some people use what's called an X-Acto knife. That's quite dangerous to use. It can also damage whatever's under your cutting. So scissors just work great. You can do this without folding in half, but I just find the folding in half just makes it a little bit easier. And one more line here. Okay, so now I've got all my cut lines, and I'm just going to take my pair of scissors, and I'm going to cut along, again, up from the fold line, up to the top. And again, I'm not cutting all the way to the top, because I need a bit of a frame there. Now that wasn't exactly even, that's okay. So I'm just going to keep cutting until I have all these cut. Okay, I've done all my cuts, and when I open this up, I've now created my loom. Okay? So in weaving terms, this is considered your warp. These are the strings, or in this case, the paper, that we're going to weave through over and under. So the part that you weave in and out is called the weft. And we're going to use paper, not yarn for this, or string, or wool. And again, you can measure every 2 centimeters. These were 2 centimeters apart, so you want to make your strips 2 centimeters apart. You can measure every 2 centimeters on each side, and then draw a line across and cut, or you could use a paper cutter. I've already got mine all cut here, so I've got all these strips that are 2 centimeters long, so that I can start weaving. And we're just going to do an in and out pattern. Okay, so you just say over the first one, under the next one, and then over, under, over, under, over, under. You can see how I'm just kind of sliding this through. Over, under, and will end being over. And then I push that right up, and you can see, because these were the same types of papers, they line up on the edges. So over, under, over, under. Now, on the next row, my next strip of paper, I do the opposite. So this one I started over, so this one I'm going to start under, and then over. And I can just use my other hand here to pick up, to help slide this through. Under. So instead of trying to bend the paper in and out, use these warp threads here, the warp papers, to lift up and then slide through. And then I'm going to move this up as close as I can. You can see that that edge is not quite straight, so I'm going to move this back that way. There we go. And you can see we're starting to get a checkerboard pattern here by using this pattern over, under, and then under, over. So you can keep going all the way to the end, and you can see here we're developing a checkerboard pattern. Okay, dark blue, light blue, dark blue, light blue, and then the next row is light blue, dark blue, light blue, dark blue. So it's an A-B pattern. But I'm going to use the same loom here. I'm going to flip it this way to show you a different kind of pattern that you can do. So instead of starting over, under, I'm going to do 2 overs, 1 under. 2 overs, 1 under. 2 overs, 1 under, and then 2 overs. Push that up. So what do you think I should do next now? So now I'm going to do, let me see here, 1 under, 2 overs, 1 under, 2 overs, 1 under, 2 overs, 1 under, and then doesn't have 2, but it does have 1 there. Okay. And now we've got, what do you think we should do next? We've got 1 under, 1, 2. So now maybe we start with 1 over, 1 under, and then 2 overs. Let's see what kind of pattern that makes. So we're always doing the 2 overs and the 1 under, but we're starting at different places and seeing what pattern is being created. Oh, did I miss one? Yeah. So let's see here. So we're getting a bit of an interesting zigzag pattern, right? Going down along those diagonals. So this one was, we've got 2, and then 0, and then 1. And so now I think I need to go back to 2. Over, under, 2 over. I'm just actually experimenting with this for the first time myself. So I'm just sort of watching to see what happens here. Okay. And that's giving me this nice sort of diagonal pattern going down here with 2 all the way through. So again, try different combinations. Maybe, 2 under, 2 over, 2 under, 2 over, or 3 over, 1 under, 3 over, 1 under, and see what comes up. So play with the different kinds of patterns. So you would probably call this AAB, AAB, AAB. Oh, here's another example of paper weaving. And this is just going to be a little bit more abstract. Here I'm going to fold it in half again to create my loom. But instead of worrying about the measurements, I'm just going to do random cuts up. And you can see I'm just stopping before there. I could do a bit of a curve in some. You could, do a curve. You could do some bit of a zigzag. There we go. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cuts. I think I'm going to stop there. And there's my, more of my, bit of a wacky loom there in terms of they're not straight. But then let's sort of see what happens. So now I'm going to take some paper and I'm going to let's start with just a pretty, I didn't measure that, but I just sort of visualized just a regular straight kind of piece. And let's see how that looks. Over, under, under, over, under. And then I could do, maybe this one I do a little bit different shape itself. Well, maybe I'll alternate a color. Why don't I do, this time I'll do this color. Just to sort of see what happens here. So now I'll go under. And again, this is, I didn't really have this planned. I'm just investigating paper weaving. I'm seeing what happens when I change things. So I've changed the cuts of my loom, my warp here, but I'm also playing with what's happening here with my weft thread. So now I'm going over, and I'm just using these different types of shapes that I can cut through, and it just makes more of an what's called abstract design, right? So it's not as regular, but I'm still getting that checkerboard type of pattern here. So here I've cut another piece. Let's see what happens here. Under, over, under, over. So again, once you know the basics of paper weaving, you can start playing with it and using different materials. See, again, I'm still trying to push it up as far as I can there. And there we go. We're starting to get some really interesting waves. Now here's my wavy weaving. How can you, let's look at the back here. So how can you play with your paper weaving? So here's just another example of some weaving. I've just taken a page out of a magazine that was in my recycling bin and some newspaper strips, and I just cut those up, again, from a newspaper that was in my recycling. And again, I can just play. I can start with over and under. So I might do that for my first row here. And see, these ones are a little bit long, and I can trim those off afterwards. And then maybe for the next row, I'm going to do 2 over and 1 under. 2 over and 1 under, and see what happens. I'm keeping these all kind of lined up here on this side, but I might change that. We'll see how that goes, and then I can trim these off, and then maybe I'll go back to starting with under, over, under, over. Again, I'm just trying some different things. I did under, over, and now again, now I'll start with maybe, again, the 2 over, 1 under, 2 over, 1 under. Just sort of noticing what different patterns are coming up. And again, interesting things happening with comic strips and text. And then again, I can glue these sort of extra pieces down if I want, especially with thinner paper. And then after I've glued them, I haven't glued them yet, but then I can just trim off the extra tabs like that. But play with different types of paper to see how that changes your weaving. Okay, this last weaving project for paper weaving we're going to do is sort of has an optical illusion or 3-dimensional effect. So we're going to start with, again, a piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to measure the width of this, because I need to know where my halfway point is. So this is 19 centimeters. So I know 9 and 9 makes 18. So that's 9, and then half of 1 centimeter is half a centimeter, so it's 9.5 centimeters. So I'm going to just mark that at the top here. And then I'm also going to mark it down here at the bottom. And that's our midpoint or our halfway point. So those are the same. Okay. Now we're going to measure, I'm going to put it back to 9.5 there. We're going to measure 1.5 centimeters over, so that'll be 8. And then another 1.5 centimeters over, so that's 7, that'll be 6.5. And then maybe one more, we'll see. 6.5, so that would be 5. And then I do the same on the other side. So adding 1.5, so to 9.5, that would be 11. And you'll have different measurements depending on the width of your paper. But it's 1.5 centimeters, all of these sort of little hash marks I'm making here. So 12.5, 13.5, that'll be 14. And then I think that's the same. 1, 2, 3 on this side, 1, 2, 3 on that side. Okay. Now we go down to the bottom. And this was 1.5. Now we're going to double that to 3 centimeters. So 9.5 centimeters. And then 3 centimeters subtracted from that would be 6.5. And then 3 centimeters subtracted from that would be 3.5. So we're only going to have 2. That's okay. And then on this side, 9.5. Then we go 3 centimeters that way. So that would be 12.5. And then 15.5. Okay, so we've got all those hash marks. And now we're going to connect those lines. Okay. So this one here, this is my center. So the one on the next one to the center, to the right of the center, I connect to the right of the center one down here. So these are going to be diagonal, okay, because this is further away from the center than this one is. And that was a little bit off, but that's okay. And then this one here. Okay. And then again on this side, I'm just going to move over here. I can connect my 2 centers here. And then the diagonal. And then this diagonal here. Okay, and then again, I'm going to cut along those lines, but I'm not going to go up to the top. I'm going to leave, this is kind of the back side, so leave a bit of a frame there. Last one here. Okay, then we're going to open this up, and this will be our loom or our warp for this next type of weaving we're going to do. Can you visualize what that's going to look like when we start weaving our paper through? Okay, now we're going to start weaving, and I've cut these black strips. They're 3 centimeters wide because that was the distance between these points here. Okay, so over, under, same thing, over, under, over, under. Push that up as far as you can, and again, I've got some of these are a little bit longer, so I'll trim them afterwards. And then this next one, I'm going to do under, over, under, over, under, over. As close as that to you as you can. Over, under. Do you start to see sort of that optical illusion appearing in the weaving? I think it's super effective when you use a dark and a light color. So that contrast, you use black and white, or just a darker color and a lighter color. Like I have here, I've got black and this sort of, actually it's quite a bright green, but it's light in the sense that there's a nice contrast between the black and it. So you can start to see here, you can look at it this way, but you can also look at it this way and see that sort of optical illusion starting to develop. So I'll just finish weaving the rest through. Okay, so I finished all the weaving and I cut off the extra paper that was hanging off the outside of this paper here. And you can see, you can either look at it this way and you can sort of see an optical illusion. It starts to sort of make it look three-dimensional, like a cube or a prism. Now you can either leave these tabs here and you can just glue each of them down. If you've woven it securely, they will stay in place. Or if you want, you can try and trim those off, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do. So I'm going to turn it over to the back side. That's where I have still all those pencil markings from before. And I'm just going to use some tape, and I'm going to just put some tape on this. And again, it's the back side, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to cross, do an X to cross as much of these pieces of weaving as I can to just hold them securely in place. Just don't want any coming over onto the front. And then just do a couple more across here. Like this. Again, just to hold as many pieces in place as you can. You don't have to do this, but it'll just make it a little bit more secure when you're doing your trimming. Okay? So now we're going to use our scissors. And again, this is, you could have an adult help you if you have an X-Acto knife and trim exactly along the edge. I'm just going to carefully lift up that tab and get as close to that line as I can. See, there you can see a little bit coming out. That's okay. So I'm going to keep going up along each side. And try not to trim the green paper, only the black paper. And I'll do that on this side as well until I have all those extra tabs trimmed off.